Cerita bagaimanakah pengalaman setiap perniagaan usahawan kecil dan sederhana? Apakah cabaran yang mereka hadapi dan bagaimanakah mereka mengatasi setiap perintangan yang dihadapi untuk mengukir setiap kejayaan yang mereka ada sehingga kini. Dan kita akan tambah satu lagi kisah kejayaan dengan pengasas Sumatera Industri Sdn Berhad iaitu Syafullah Cik Gani berumur 35 tahun berkata modal permulaan hanya bermula dengan RM1,500 dan setiap keuntungan dijadikan modal pusingan disebabkan ketika itu pandemik COVID-19 di mana kebanyakan aktiviti ekonomi telah menurun ketika itu dan kini perniagaan Sumatera telah berjaya menghasilkan pendapatan sebanyak 3.5 juta dan ini adalah jumlah setakat tahun 2023. Dengan itu saya mempersilakan tuan badannya sendiri iaitu Syafullah Gani, pengasas Sumatera Industri Sdn Berhad. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih Encik Syafullah kerana sudi meluangkan masa bersama kami. Sudah tentu kalau kita lihat di atas meja dengan produk-produk yang diadakan sini menunjukkan kepelbagaian produk yang telah diadakan. Mungkin boleh kongsikan sedikit latar belakang bagaimanakah perjalanan perniagaan Encik Syafullah mengenai Sumatera sehinggalah kini.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat pagi kepada Nina dan juga terima kasih kepada Astro AWANI dan juga Unified Business menjemput saya ke Niaga AWANI. Nama saya Syafullah Gani, founder kepada Sumatera Industri Sdn Berhad dan Sumatera basically bukanlah daripada Indonesia tapi Sumatera adalah bermaksud datang daripada bahasa Terengganu, semua kena tera. So Sumatera semua kena tera. Brand datang daripada musim COVID tahun 2020 di mana di zaman kejahatan saya macam yang Nina cakap tadi, saya bermula dengan 1,500, bermula di rumah, bermula di dapur sendiri dan pada waktu itu kita naik slowly dan bermula dengan sama daging dinding. Kenapa Sumatera dan kenapa ready to eat? Kerana background saya adalah tourism. So yang saya nampak, saya tak nampak apa yang boleh saya buat pada waktu itu. Tapi apa yang saya fikir, andai tourism dah sudden stop. So apa yang saya boleh buat dan apa yang benda saya nak buat ni boleh sustain selepas COVID. Dan pada waktu tu saya fikir makanan ni macam okey. Cuma makanan macam tak sesuai pada waktu tu sebabnya nak kena deliver dan juga masak tu tak semua orang suka dan macam mana kita nak makanan tu terus habis. So di situ kita buat R&D, kita tengok market pasaran pada waktu COVID. Dan sebab waktu tu memang saya, Nina memang saya betul-betul susah. That's why macam Nina cakap tadi, saya mula dengan RM1,500. Saya slowly daripada situ. Dan saya cuba fikir macam mana saya nak kecilkan. Sebab dalam market pada waktu tu yang ada pada macam makan ready to eat ini, dia ada dalam 200-180 gram. Tapi saya bermula dengan 100 gram. Sebab waktu COVID kita nak dari segi hygiene purpose, kita nak buka dan terus habiskan. Dan alhamdulillah inovasi yang kita buat dengan Sumatera adalah dinding. Kalau macam Nina tengok sekarang dinding banyak di pasaran. Tapi kalau kita dulu kalau Nina perasan ataupun tidak, dulu tak ada sambal daging dinding. Dulu adalah rendang daging dinding ataupun dinding kering. Jadi sebab orang Malaysia kita ni Nina, kalau diorang suruh makan pedas. Jadi kalau pergi ke mana-mana pun diorang suruh makan pedas. Kalau macam kita pergi ke Mekah kan, kalau pergi ke umrah dan haji, dah sampai ke Bukit Safa tu, antara masalah diorang makanan diorang tu tak pedas. So tu adalah golongan-golongan senior citizen. Dan waktu kita cuba inovasikan macam mana kita nak dinding ini, makanan masak kicap, goreng kicap ni kita nak pedaskan dia. Kita buat beberapa kali dah tak jadi dan kita dapat momentum tu di mana pedas tu boleh daripada kecil dan sampailah ke orang tua. Dan di situlah kita viral. Kita viral selepas proses pengembangan lah. Tapi of course proses pengembangan tu kita tak semudah yang disangka. Kita bermula dengan slowly dan kita mula dengan agent. Saya ada WhatsApp, saya tak ada internet, saya pakai hotspot dan saya ada laptop. Antara kekurangan saya pada waktu tu ialah bila kita ada laptop, kita ada internet, kita pakai hotspot, internet cepat, bateri cepat habis. So saya pakai sistem agent dan kita ada sehingga 300 agent dan pada waktu tu ialah macam-macam, kadang-kadang internet down dan sebagainya. Dan nak jaga agent ni bukannya senang, kena sudah standby. Jadi kita slowly move to Shopee. Daripada sistem aja kita maintain, kita sekarang tak ada berkadar 500, daripada 300 meningkat ke 500 dan kita ada sistem Shopee dan kita terus ke TikTok Shop. Sumatera ada antara whitelist dalam TikTok Shop. So that's why pada tahun 2022 Sumatera menjadi satu fenomena sama daging dinding. Pada waktu tu kita berkatakan kita terjual lebih 300,000 pack pada tahun 2022 dan bagi positif impact lah. Dan pada waktu tu kita fikir tak boleh buat kat rumah. memang tak boleh bawa ke rumah, kita kena ada satu premis. So kita cari satu premis berdekatan di puncak alam, berdekatan dengan rumah. Di situ kita start hire staff. Kita ada staff yang pertama dan masih lagi bersama dengan kita. Dan slowly kita bagi peluang pekerjaan dan sekarang alhamdulillah kita ada lebih kurang 13 orang. Dan daripada samadah dinding kita kembangkan kepada 8 produk. Cuma ialah bila sebut kita ada kilang sendiri ni, kita boleh buat macam-macam kan. Cumanya apa nak buat orang kenal dengan Sumatera ni. Jadi first kalau ke sama Sumatera dinding. Kau pergi mana-mana pun cuba try. Dan sekarang pun ada satu influencer yang buat benda yang sama juga, alhamdulillah. Dan sekarang kita pergi to the next step, kita fokus pada rendang lah. Kalau Dina nanti cuba rendang kita, tengok apa kelebihan rendang kita kat sana lah. Dan di situlah kita slowly sampai ke hari ini kita maintain dengan staff yang ada dan kita terus kembangkan ke peringkat seterusnya lah. InsyaAllah tahun ini kita cuba untuk masuk pasaran Dubai pada bulan depan.
Baik, Encik Syafullah telah mengkongsikan perjalanan ataupun kita boleh cakap pengalaman sepanjang usahakan perniagaan Sumatera ini. Seperti yang Encik Syafullah kongsikan, saya boleh try sekejap lagi kan produk-produk ini. Begitu menarik. Mula hanya dengan laptop dengan hotspot sahaja, lepas tu mula di rumah, waktu yang mencabar, waktu pandemik COVID-19 di mana waktu-waktu perniagaan-perniagaan sedia ada yang dah lama berjaya pun kita dapat lihat bungkus perniagaan mereka, tetapi kita lihat Sumatera berjaya sehingga kini 2023 saja dah catat iaitu lebih kurang 3.5 juta hasil jana pendapatan daripada lebih kurang pelbagai produk, 8 produk. Betul. Dan rancang pula untuk kembang sehingga Dubai selepas ini. Okey, kalau kita lihat waktu pandemik itu sedikit halangan mungkin daripada segi wifi, internet. Lepas tu macam mana nak pastikan makanan ini dapat disampai ke pelanggan-pelanggan di luar sana. Mungkin boleh kongsikan cabaran masa kini sebab kita dah tahu mungkin daripada cabaran yang you hadap internet, macam mana nak fikir logistik itu perkara susah, tapi sehingga kini you mampu atasi dah you cari penyelesaian inovasi untuk pastikan perkara-perkara ini dapat dilaksanakan dengan baik. Mungkin cabaran masa kini apa daripada segi cabaran kita nak lihat competition makin tinggi, banyak produk yang ready to eat. Sekarang ini apa you punya unique selling position yang buat you berbeza dengan produk-produk yang lain?
Okey. Apa yang kita terapkan kat sini, yang utamanya kalau tengok dalam saya punya organisasi, yang saya sangat tekan adalah dari segi marketing division. Dan dalam marketing division kita ada 2 customer service. Dan bagi saya customer service dalam satu bisnes adalah sangat penting. Kalau tengok di sini, bila kita sebut customer service, kita perlukan internet yang kuat. Dan kita tak nak bila kata kita buat kerja, stuck. Dan juga kita ada live host, kadang live host, kenapa macam review tak naik apa semua, kita perlukan internet yang kuat. Dan apa yang best dekat sini dengan Unify ni kan, sebab ialah banyak dekat luar, tapi rezeki saya dengan Unify Business ni, masa saya pergi mencari office, kebetulan saya nampak satu booth dekat simpang Unify. So saya tanya dia, sebab for me kalau pakai mana-mana pun tak kisah. So saya tanya dia ada tak internet yang sesuai untuk bisnes. So dia propose kat saya. Dia propose kat saya Unify Business, which bayar tak mahal, bukan dalam 100 lebih je. Bayar 100 lebih dan lepas pasang. Dan pada waktu tu saya rasa benda ni ada beberapa skeptikal. Ada orang kata macam Unify ni start lah apalah. Saya pun hadapi benda yang sama juga. Tapi yang the best part adalah macam saya cakap tadi, customer service is important. Jadi alhamdulillah, sebab saya pun banyak join event apa semua, bila saya nampak dia tanya kenapa internet saya ni, kenapa saya nak call tak dapat dah. Cakap memang situ banyak line yang
tak cover.
Yang queue tak cover, lepas tu call ramai orang queue semua. Apa kata cik cuba contact melalui messenger, apa kata cik contact melalui phone, tekan 100, dia tu lagi cepat. Lagi-lagi kalau cik Unify Business, lagi cepat dia orang layan. Saya cakap, bagus ni kata. So dari situ macam mana daripada awal saya buka office yang pertama, dan alhamdulillah sekarang kita dah ada 2 premis dan kita masih lagi memakai Unify Business sebab bagi kita senang. Bagi kita senang, dan alhamdulillah juga sekarang saya telah join beberapa event usahawan di bawah JIWA SME dan diorang sudah bagi support. Dan apa yang best daripada internet yang bagus, customer service yang bagus, sebab bagi saya hanya laju akan maju. So kalau internet tak laju, memang tak majulah kita. So yang tu antara kenapa saya pilih Unify, dan di kawasan saya tu memang Unify antara yang terbaik. Nombor 2 adalah dari customer service dia. Dia ada beberapa channel di mana kalau tak dapat call hotline, kita boleh pergi melalui messenger 912, memang dia orang yang sangat cepat. Dan juga dia pun ada, lepas office hour dia ada satu nama Maya Chat. Yang tu pun segala info tu boleh chat dalam tu. So yang lain saya tak pandai sangat sebab saya tak biasa, sebab saya dah biasa dengan Unify. Dan nombor 3 adalah dari segi cloud. Sebab sebelum saya pakai Unify, bagi kita video dan gambar tu adalah aset kepada company. Di mana kita nak simpan dalam laptop cepat penuh. Simpan ke dalam Google Cloud kita kena bayar tiap-tiap tahun. Agak tinggi. Tapi kalau dengan Unify Business, dia ada satu Unify Cloud. So yang saya baru tahu je sebab kita main simpan je, dia boleh bagi up to 1 terabyte besar tu Nina. So dari situlah saya start convert semua daripada beberapa email, beberapa Google Drive, kita convert kepada cloud lah, kepada Unify Cloud, pakai kelebihan yang ada. Di mana saya rasa banyak usahawan luar tak tahu pasal benda ni, dan saya pun sebenarnya baru tahu.
Dan penting untuk kita lihat perjalanan ini untuk lihat bagaimanakah Unify Business telah membantu mempertingkat dan mempukuh lagi perniagaan Sumatera sehingga kini ada perancangan untuk pergi ke peringkat antarabangsa di Dubai. Mungkin boleh kongsikan untuk usahawan di luar sana, terutama anak-anak muda belia yang mungkin ragu untuk memulakan perniagaan tetapi sudah jelas terbukti melihatkan kerjasama atau bantuan daripada Unify Business telah membantu perniagaan Sumatera sendiri berkembang sehingga kini sehingga boleh mencapai setiap tahun lebih daripada kita boleh cakap 3 juta hasil jana pendapatan daripada produk kita boleh cakap ready to eat ini, dan banyak lagi competition tetapi kita lihat Sumatera masih berdiri kukuh, teguh dan padu sehingga kini. Mungkin boleh kongsikan harapan, nasihat kepada mereka agar dapat lihat jangan takut kerana kita tahu ini adalah untuk masa depan mereka juga. Okey.
Saya letak nama Sumatera lah. Sebelum kita start dengan online, kita banyak pergi kepada ejen dan juga kita banyak supply kepada NGO yang mana supply kepada masa banjir. Di mana apa yang kita buat, sebab waktu tu saya dengan wife saja yang buat kerja pada rumah. Jadi apa yang kita buat, kita jaga ejen dan juga kita akan call, kita akan tengok dalam Google tu, kita call satu-satu, nak supply untuk masa banjir tak? Nak supply untuk bencana alam tak? Bla bla apa semua. Tapi untuk sekarang dengan adanya Unify dan juga yang the best part, Unify sekarang dia ada satu DMS, yang marketing support, digital marketing support kalau tak silap. Jadi dekat situ macam Sumatera kita dah ada team marketing yang dedicated untuk TikTok. Macam sekarang business tak ada TikTok, ibarat tak ada business zaman sekarang. Jadi tapi kita agak terabai dengan Instagram dan juga Facebook, di mana itu pun adalah platform yang penting sebab people behavior, orang pergi ke TikTok dengan pergi ke Facebook adalah orang yang berlainan behavior, dan sama juga pergi ke Google. Jadi macam untuk Sumatera, kita di TikTok, Instagram, Facebook agak bagus. Saya tak cakap perfect, tapi agak kita ada tim yang dedicated untuk buat. Cuma kelemahan Sumatera adalah kita tak begitu go deep dekat Google Ads, di mana kalau dulu saya kena call diorang untuk dapatkan bisnes bulk purchase macam OEM dan sebagainya. Sekarang tak perlu. Sekarang bagi siapa yang perlu kembali, macam contoh Nina, kalau you nak cari sesuatu benda kan, saya rasa kalau benda tu penting, Nina mesti pergi ke Google. Nina tak pergi kepada TikTok. Kalau nak pergi cari apa makan, tempat makan best, mungkin ke TikTok. Tapi mungkin nak cari supplier kain murah, definitely kita akan pergi ke Google. So sekarang alhamdulillah kita banyak dapat tiba-tiba dapat WhatsApp, boleh tak saya nak tahu harga OEM, boleh tak saya tahu harga untuk supply kepada bencana alam macam tu. So kita tak payah cari. Kalau dulu saya buat call, sekarang ni diorang cari kita. Jadi untuk belia-belia ke sana, macam saya masih lagi belia, alhamdulillah 35 tahun. Jadi untuk belia-belia dan juga warga emas, jangan ada satu skeptikal di mana cukuplah kita pergi bisnes macam ni. Cuba pergi beyond. Contoh makcik-makcik yang jual goreng pisang dekat luar. Betul, jual goreng pisang dekat tepi jalan, tapi buat je goreng pisang mungkin dekat rumah. So mungkin dekat situ ada beberapa benda yang kita buat untuk support online. Kita akan pakai internet. Gunalah Unify Business kalau dah berdaftarlah dengan SSM lah, dan kalau boleh dia ada support DMS. Kalau tak pandai Facebook, Instagram, minta diorang bantu. Diorang ada some package as low as RM200 per month. Kalau macam saya Sumatera, macam kita Sumatera, kita tak pandai sangat dari segi Google Ads, kita minta bantuan diorang. Macam siapa yang TikTok adalah wajib tapi tak pandai Facebook, minta bantuan diorang. So macam contoh untuk belia-belia, definitely TikTok adalah nombor 1. Cuba minta diorang in charge. Mungkin Facebook, mungkin Instagram kita dah tak type ni. Kita tak buat low value punya stuff. Jadi untuk yang mana yang keluar, jangan takut. Pakai je internet, sangat penting kat mana-mana. Tanpa internet bisnes tak jalan, sebab sekarang ni bisnes tanpa sempadan. Jadi subscribe banyak internet kat luar sana, tapi saya personally, saya bukan bodek ke apa semua. Pakailah Unified Business, banyak kelebihan. Nak tahu lebih lagi, masuk je website diorang. So macam saya sekarang, daripada dulu sampai sekarang, kalau kata saya nak tukar ke tak, saya tak tukar kot, walaupun kat luar sana mungkin diorang offer telefon, diorang offer TV dan sebagainya. Tapi bagi saya, kelajuan internet tu bagi saya penting.
Apa yang boleh cakapkan kepada Cik Syafullah pada masa akan datang kalau kita lihat waktu memulakan perniagaan waktu pandemik COVID-19, waktu sudah mencabar, tapi itu adalah langkah berani. Sehingga kini kita dapat lihat kejayaan yang telah dicapai oleh Sumatera sendiri untuk cari hotspot, nak pakai phone, internet, kita perlukan lebih untuk ketersambungan untuk capai setiap pengguna-pengguna customer ini. Dan kedua, kita lihat apabila dah establish, bagaimana untuk kembangkannya ke peringkat yang lebih tinggi. Sekiranya kita menghadapi cabaran pada masa akan datang, apa yang boleh dikatakan Encik Syafullah, persediaan, okey, kita dilanda lagi masalah, apa antara perkara awal, persediaan awal yang perlu dilakukan mengambil kira daripada moral-moral ataupun yang telah dipelajari pengalaman dahulu? Okey.
Bagi saya pegang dua prinsip. Daripada saya punya sifu lah, saya banyak refer dengan dia. Tapi saya tak ada sifu pemasaran yang spesifik, tapi saya memang selalu ikut dia. Dan nombor dua adalah daripada ayah saya. Daripada saya punya sifu, Dr. Zulkifli, saya selalu dia bagi saya satu, saya full berjalan kena ke depan, jangan ke belakang. So kalau apa-apa kat depan, hadap je. Sebab before this mungkin pandemik tu berlaku dengan cara macam tu. Tapi itu adalah iktibar kita belajar macam mana kita nak upgrade. Dan nombor dua adalah sebab saya orang Terengganu, Sumatera, semua kena terah orang Terengganu. Dia kata, "Bear, kerja kita buat aja. Buat dan buat. Jangan tanya bila Allah nak bagi. Allah akan sentiasa bagi pada masa yang tepat, pada waktu yang tepat. At the right place, at the right time. So kita buat je. So itu saya pegang. Buat bisnes ni, usahawan-usahawan kat luar sana dan saya sendiri, kita selalu ada peringkat down. Alamak, tak ada orang nak beli, anak ini bisnes slow lah apa semua. Relax. Relax, tengok apa benda-benda yang kita kena tambah baik. Mungkin hari ini kita punya live tak bagus, tapi mungkin Shopee kita bagus, tambah balik kat Shopee. Tapi mungkin Shopee kita tak bagus, pergi tempat lain. Tapi yang paling utama sekali,
jangan give up.
Jangan give up. Apa manfaat? Jangan menjual. Produk-produk semua ni semua ada produk yang bagus, tapi apa manfaat yang kita boleh bagi dekat orang? Bagi saya itulah antara yang penting, sebab orang membeli sebab ada masalah. Orang tak ada masalah, dia tak membeli. Itu je.
Betul. Kita harus memikirkan apakah manfaat yang diterima oleh pengguna, terutama daripada segi bukan saja untuk memenuhi keperluan hidup, tapi adakah ia memenuhi sebagai penyelesaian kepada kehidupan mereka.
Nina.
Sekali lagi saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada Syafullah Ghani, merupakan pengasas Sumatera Industri Sedang Berhad, kerana berkongsikan pengalaman dan cerita sepanjang perniagaan telah diusahakan dan apakah perancangan masa akan datang. Dan sudah tentu setiap perkongsian ini akan kami rangkumkan adalah asrawani.com, dan jangan lupa untuk bersama kami mengenai Grand Finale JIWA SME yang akan berlangsung di Sadra ICT Shah Alam bermula 25 hingga 27 Oktober ini, dan kita akan jumpa anda semua di sana.
Dibawakan oleh penaja utama jelajah JIWA SME, Unified Business, rakan digital pilihan anda.
Nak coklat? Hari ni tak boleh. Nanti saya kena dengan mak saya.
Pepsodent baharu disahkan halal. Mikrokalsium aktif dan Proflorida Kompleks membantu memperbaiki lubang halus akibat makanan manis sebelum menjadi kaviti untuk pelindungan maksimum. Pepsodent. Sansol Anti-Klomoma baharu diperkaya dengan minyak tea tree, aloe vera dan ginseng. Rambut akan bebas dari klomoma, kuat dan sihat. Sansol Anti-Klomoma baharu dan juga semburkan vitamin mis baharu agar rambut kekal wangi.
Alright, welcome back to Niaga AWANI. Right now, we're going to focus on the mega infrastructure, where how much should we spend to make it worthwhile. Where there will be no more mega projects, says Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, and he said that national development will focus on infrastructure, facilities and projects of public interest, as well as supporting industrial areas according to state priorities. And to discuss further on this, with me virtually right now is Mr. Siva Shankar, CEO of Estate Agency Rahim & Co. First of all, when we talk about balancing mega infrastructure spending with housing needs, maybe you can share with us, with significant investment in infrastructure projects, how do you propose the government balance spending on mega projects with addressing critical housing shortages, maybe especially for middle-income Malaysians?
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Good morning. To answer your question, this balancing act is probably the most difficult thing to do. You need to balance whether cost versus effect. How much money do I put in versus what kind of benefit do I get back? Let's be very clear on one thing. I think large infrastructure projects, especially projects which are like roads and rail and trains, stuff like that, you probably never get a return on your investment ever. It probably is a social project that is put in place to alleviate the living standards of the occupants of the city or the town that they're in.
Mr. Siva, are there risks in diverting too much capital towards large-scale infrastructure, maybe at expenses of addressing housing affordability?
There are risks, of course, because you take a big risk of having put billions of dollars into a project. And if there's no traction from the public, if there's no usage of that project to its full advantage, then the risk of it turning into a white elephant is always there. So we have, I think, if you look back in time, we have done some major infrastructure projects in Malaysia, some of which I think seem to be a little bit underutilized. But many of these infrastructure projects have become very well utilized, like the trains, the LRT and the MRT, and even the airports. I think those are infrastructure projects that, even though they are very expensive and costs billions of dollars, Malaysia has no choice at all but to go forward with those infrastructure projects. If you want to be a first world country, you must have first world infrastructure. Simple as that.
Maybe how do you see mega infrastructure projects like improved public transportation or highways like ECRL and a few highways, especially in Klang Valley, influencing housing markets in urban centres like in Klang Valley, Kuala Lumpur? Will they make home ownership more attainable or drive up prices further?
Well, the buzzword in the housing market today is TOD. Transport-oriented development. A transport-oriented development is defined as a development that is within or close to a train station, an LRT or an MRT station. Now, although these are great public amenities and it's good for us to have a train station near the house or near the apartment, what it has done, in essence, is it has pushed prices upwards a little bit. So a transport-oriented development is able to sell for 20, maybe 30% more than a normal development, a similar normal development, which is not on a line or not close to a station.
Yeah. Maybe you can share, can infrastructure development in more remote areas, for example, like as you can see, ECRL in Kelantan, for example, help alleviate housing pressure in urban centres, or maybe in terms of suburban, and what role should the government play in making these areas more attractive?
Okay. Look, if you had Malaysians are a spoiled bunch. We like to drive everywhere. That's why our roads are packed with cars. And we seem not to have too much of affinity for transport, for public transport. But if you go to other parts of the world, if you looked at places like London, I think it's not impossible at all to live far away from the city, get up in the morning, jump on a fast train, and the train takes an hour and a half, and you're in the city. I live in Sungai Long, and it takes me an hour and a half to come to work every morning anyway. What difference would it make if I lived in Ipoh and I could take a train and be in Kuala Lumpur city centre in an hour and a half? The living in Ipoh to me would be the same as living in Sungai Long, because it would take an hour and a half. So if the public transport, that train, was fast, reliable, and to point, I could live in Ipoh, and that would take the pressure off the city, and it would give places, faraway places like Ipoh and everywhere else, a new lease in life. So it's a double thing.
Mrs. Siva, I would like to bring our discussion into sustainability of infrastructure-led growth. Is the current approach to mega infrastructures project sustainable from an economic perspective, and maybe particularly in ensuring that housing, healthcare, and education don't take a back seat?
Infrastructure and housing cannot always be tied together. Take, for example, KLIA, the airport, which is a major infrastructure project. If you try and tie it with housing, then you may not have a correlation that succeeds. But you've got to look at the infrastructure project as something for the good of the country. So you build KLIA in Sepang, and over the last 10 years, the whole of the Sepang area has come to life. There's a big industrial area there. There's lots and lots of housing there. There's some colleges and universities there. So this is great. That single infrastructure project has breathed a lease of life to the entire location. That, I think, is the multiplier effect we must look at.
Yeah. Maybe in terms of, in your experience, what is the optimal level of infrastructure investment to spur long-term growth while ensuring that other essential sectors such as affordable housing are not neglected?
Again, I think infrastructure and housing must be separated. I think what will happen, or what really does happen, is as infrastructure grows, as infrastructure expands, you will find that housing will follow. Now, that's the mantra anyway. Just follow the infrastructure. So follow the trains or follow the roads. Look at the Plus Highway. Look at what the highway has done for the larger part of the Klang Valley. There is so much of development in the northern and southern parts of Klang Valley, which could not have been possible if not for the North-South Highway. So I could get from KL to Rawang or even Bukit Berontong in half an hour, 45 minutes. And therefore, I don't mind living over there. So the infrastructure has opened up housing.
One of the main indicator and also initiative that we should look on at the public-private partnership. Would you advocate for more PPPs in infrastructure development, similar to the maybe My Home Guarantee Scheme for housing? Or could this model drive both affordable housing and also large-scale infrastructure?
I think if the government, my opinion is infrastructure should be government-led, and to a large extent it has been. I mean, look at KLIA, look at the MRT projects, look at the LRT project. They really have been government-driven. But government-private partnerships is always welcome in the event that the government doesn't have the kind of money to spend or can't afford to spend that kind of money at this very moment. Then I think it's a good idea to bring in a private partner, let him run it. And unfortunately, when that happens, the private partner will need his money back in some way. And so therefore, the toll collections and stuff like that.
Mr. Siva, in your opinion, how can developers be incentivized to integrate housing needs into large infrastructure projects, ensuring a holistic approach to urban planning?
The developers, we need to be very careful here. The developers cannot be expected to be the driver of these infrastructure projects. Because if they are, then I can assure you they will find a way to put that cost back into the houses. So the public ends up paying for it. Nobody is going to spend $1 billion to do infrastructure and not pass that cost on to their purchasers. So we need to be careful. We need to separate infrastructure and housing. If you try and combine that, my opinion is the prices of houses will skyrocket upwards.
And of course, we need to discuss on the ROI of the mega infrastructure investment. Maybe what metrics should we use to assess whether spending on mega infrastructure projects has been worthwhile, and is there a point at which the social and economic returns diminish?
I think some infrastructure projects may have an ROI, but whilst others may not have an ROI, so you may have to look at the social impact and the humanity and community impact to gauge success. For example, if you let's take the airport as an example. I think the airport is a huge success. Malaysia airports seem to be making money, so that infrastructure has produced a nice, healthy, comfortable return. But if you look at other infrastructure projects, take for example the MRTs. I don't see how they can be profitable, at least not in the short to medium term. Perhaps in the long term, in the very long term, maybe it might turn profitable. Maybe it might not. And the ECRL, which goes into Kuantan, Pahang, Terengganu, and Kelantan, that's going to be a great catalyst for developments in the east coast of Malaysia. Yeah. But try as I might, I cannot see it turning profitable because the cost is so huge.
Yeah. Lastly, maybe about around 2 minutes of our discussion, can large-scale infrastructure investment be strategically used to unlock affordable housing opportunities, particularly in underdeveloped regions? And how should the government prioritize between these two?
I think that's a good question, and I think yes. The answer to that is yes. Infrastructure projects can unlock opportunities for affordable housing. If land in central KL or its periphery is very expensive, and you cannot build affordable housing or low-cost housing on these pieces of land, then you need to move further. But if you move further and further away from the city, nobody wants to buy because they can't travel back and forth. But if you build a solid set of highways, interconnecting roads, and more importantly, if you build rail trains to these locations, then it offers the average public person, the B40 or the M20, to allow them to buy properties further away, because they can jump on a train and come to work in the city, or the kids can jump on a train and go to school and come back. So that is the idea. Expand the infrastructure and housing will follow.
Mm-hmm. Of course, investing in mega infrastructure projects is a complex decision that requires careful consideration of cost, benefits, and long-term impacts. And however, determining the right amount to spend involves balancing immediate financial outlays with future returns and societal benefits. Thank you so much, Mr. Siva Shankar, CEO of estate agency Rahim & Co. Let's take a short break. After this, we'll be with Ibrahim Sani, The Economy with Ibrahim Sani, right after this.
Baharu Magnum Mango Yogurt Parfait dan Chocolate Blocks. Ice cream yogurt sos mangga coklat putih. Untuk waktu siang. Aiskrim coklat sos berisi biskut coklat beranggur. Untuk waktu malam, nikmatlah selalu.
Sunsilk Strong and Long Baharu menguatkan rambut dari akar ke hujung. Biarkan panjang. Strong and Long.
Nak coklat? Hari ni tak boleh. Nanti saya kena dengan mak saya.
Pepsodent Baharu disahkan halal. Mikrokalsium aktif dan Proflorida Complex membantu memperbaiki lubang halus akibat makanan manis sebelum menjadi kaviti untuk pelindungan maksimum. Pepsodent.
Baharu, Magnum Mango Yogurt Parfait. Aiskrim yogurt pusaran sos mangga. Coklat putih Belgian tebal. Magnum Mango Yogurt Parfait. Kenikmatan sejati.
Thanks for joining us. This is The Economy with me, Ibrahim Sani. I'm on location at Sunway University. We want to talk to some academics here to talk about some of the views of Belanjawan 2025 and also to look at the preparatory notes and the preparatory plans for the 13th Malaysia Plan that is going to be implemented in 2026. So there's a lot of RMK 13 work that is currently being doing now. But before we jump into that, I want to introduce my guest for the show. On site with me right now at Sunway University is Professor Kim Lang, the Professor and Director of the Jeffrey Chia Institute. How are you, Prof?
Thank you, I'm good.
I want to ask you and be honest about this. Did you watch the whole budget speech or did you just read the excerpts?
I actually watched almost the entire segment except for the last few minutes.
So what are your initial thoughts on the budget? Did you find it a prudent budget or did you find it more of a political notion budget? What was your initial thought of it?
I think it is both prudent and then importantly also in line with our expectations. Largely because this is the third Madani budget, so we have to look at the previous long-term plan, the medium-term plan, particularly the RMK mid-term review of the RMK 12, and then going forward, what is in store for RMK 13.
Yeah.
And the important aspect that I see here is that it continues to emphasize that need to raise the ceiling. That means accelerating growth and structural transformation. And besides raising the ceiling, we also must not forget the floor. We have to lift the floor. So it is basically the layman's term for growth with equity. And we do see a lot of measures broadly in line with trying to raise the ceiling. That means expanding growth, and then importantly, ensuring that the prosperity is distributed across all segments of the population. So it's raising the floor to ensure that it's inclusive and also benefits everybody.
You touched on the two pillars that the budget is very much based on, raising the ceiling, raising the floor, and of course the third pillar is on improving governance and administration. One of the big conversations that we saw post-budget announcement is on implementing some of the things that has been announced, such as the petrol subsidy, for instance. There's a lot of debate, at least in my WhatsApp group, what constitutes T15, and there's some graphs that is being shared in the WhatsApp group. I don't know how true it is. Say, for instance, in KL or Putrajaya, you need to earn maybe 16,000 household, then you are T15. But somewhere else, only 7,000 already qualifies you as T15. I think it's not just about what qualifies you to be T15 or not. We want to know what are the thinking that you have in classifying our wealth, classifying our population based on wealth. B40, M40, T20 seems to be unusable moving forward. What are your thinking in terms of this?
We all know that classified by income groups is not perfect, largely because sometimes the income doesn't reflect the wealth owned by the individual. So importantly, given that the income classification needs to be further refined, and if it is based on household, it's subject to a lot of variables. For example, the size of the family, the type of assets, type of the location you are. All these are variables that will constitute what we consider the rich household. So defining the rich and the super rich, how we can exclude the rich from receiving the kind of subsidies. That's the challenge facing the government.
Yeah.
So I think the good thing here is that the definition has now been broadened, not just based on income level, but also taking into consideration the size of the family, the net disposable income, and then importantly also perhaps the location. But I think the important economic concept here is means testing. You have to go through a very rigorous means testing, including interviewing the person, going to the house to check what are the items, what are the assets that they have, and then ensuring that all the wealth is taken into consideration in determining whether you qualify or not for the various types of subsidies.
But we're already doing that for census. Are you suggesting means testing household-based but sampling? Because I don't know whether we can do this population-wide.
Yes, it can be done. Largely because we already have what they call the household income survey. Now we just add in and perhaps also define what constitutes to be what they call rich household, and then tagging them based on their income level, and then of course the other information that goes into defining whether they qualify or not for the subsidies. Importantly, subsidies has to be based on prevailing economic and financial conditions. Because a rich household, because of certain emergencies, they could actually lose all their wealth or lose their income and become a B40 or even hardcore poor if they are financially distressed. So all these factors will have to be taken into consideration in deciding whether they are eligible for the subsidies. So I think it's a very, very nuanced but importantly targeted, so that no one is left behind, but at the same time, those who do not deserve the subsidies can give their subsidies away, for those deserving households. So the concept is equitable distribution, a fair, if it's implemented fairly, I think all Malaysians will accept the approach.
I don't think anybody would disagree with means testing and trying to understand better in terms of what qualifies a person to be so-called quote-unquote rich or not rich. But I think the issue here is on whether or not people feel that they are equitably treated.
Yes.
Especially when somebody who earns, let's say, 20,000 ringgit in KL, that may seem a lot. But when you think about rising cost of living, household debt, single income earner of the household, codependencies, upwards as well, parents, even grandparents, children, grandchildren, all this other stuff. I don't think you can please anybody and everyone. How do you ensure that the process is transparent enough? Do you think the government is doing that?
As we have seen in the PADU system, it is gathering as much information as possible. Of course, some are confidential, some are not. I think what's important here is that you have to be very comprehensive in terms of getting all the relevant information that goes into the definition and measuring that classification. So the measure has to be defined clearly, and then importantly, data are available. And then of course, at the last stage, the last resort, there should be an appeal process, and that appeal process will help to ensure that those that are left out are able to so-called appeal to get the subsidies back. So I think the key question, the key challenge here is to ensure that the what you call exclusion error is minimized, and then the inclusion error is also minimized, in the sense that those who are included, they are the deserving ones.
We've heard the Minister of Economy talking about exclusion error and inclusion error and inclusivity or exclusivity risk. It's not just about, once we got the plan up, then we can better target subsidies, not just for petrol subsidies, any subsidies for that matter. Do you feel that it is currently progressing well in your view? Or do you feel that from the process of execution we're still lacking in some way?
It is a gradual process of building up your database, and also importantly updating and cleaning it. So that process will be always ongoing because people move in and out of the different income groups, you see. So that's an important process that has to be institutionalized. And that is what the government is trying to do. And we are facing, of course, the kind of so-called missing some of the deadlines, but that's not important. I think what's important here is to have a very comprehensive and also up-to-date database that actually reflect and capture the realities on the ground, and then importantly, minimize the exclusion and inclusion errors.
So this is the third budget, and I think I was reading The Edge saying that this already is a no mean feat because Tun Mahathir did not survive his third budget, Ismail Sabri Mohidin did not survive their third budget, and now PMX has. Do you see this importance of policy continuation as critical in order for us to achieve something meaningful in the medium and I guess long term? Or do you feel that that political expediency is needed and it's okay for the country to keep on switching over policies from now and then?
I think what's important here is that the budget is actually based on a medium-term framework, especially on the Madani economy framework that ensures that prosperity, not just that we try to achieve our high-income nation status within the planned period, which is likely within over the next few years.
Yeah, 27 according to the World Bank.
So it's very likely that we will already be in that category. And what's important now to ensure that the income distribution is equitable. So that's why inclusivity is very important in analyzing the budget, the couple of budgets before and then of course the 2025 budget. There are a lot of what you call strategies and measures taken to ensure that the floor is actually lifted and then importantly empowering the citizens, not just to receive subsidies but also to feel proud that they can graduate out of the subsidy trap.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very important change we needed in terms of mindset of receiving subsidies, and then importantly to be recognized that you are graduating out of the subsidies so-called given by the government. So I think that change is slowly happening, largely because the income growth is likely to be sustained given that the Malaysian economy has been fairly resilient and also growth has exceeded expectations for this year and then likely to continue next year. It's because of the expanding economy, or what you call the growing cake, that we are able to distribute more equally importantly, and then ensure everybody have a piece of the cake. So that inclusivity is a very key factor in terms of the Madani economy framework.
Talking about the Madani economy framework, it's not just about increasing wealth equitably, it is also bringing about social justice. And that's why we've heard the overtures by the Prime Minister saying that, you know, I mean, he said it in a broad sweeping statement, you know, GST won't be executed until minimum wage is 3,000. We won't do, we will broaden SST to include a lot more elements inside it. However, I'm unsure what the broadening of SST mean from this budget. But generally speaking, that is the idea that we want to move forward. This kind of thinking is commendable, but there are some limitations that has to be brought into question. Revenue is a big issue. I don't know how much we're going to get by taxing dividend above 100,000. I don't know. I also don't know how the compliance is going to hit us in the sense of global minimum tax policy being implemented globally, and then we have to do it here. E-invoicing. Next year we're going to see companies earning below 100 million to be e-invoiced as well. These general ideas of how the revenue structure of the country is being developed as we speak, do you think that this also brings about risk in terms of how we manage our deficit moving forward?
In the long term, the risk in terms of a gradual process of fiscal consolidation is actually lower.
Okay.
Largely because you are sustaining your spending, and that increased spending is important to not just to sustain the domestic economy, but also importantly to ensure that the spending in the right place can can build the competitive foundations for the long term.
Basically, you're saying private consumption has to grow, but in the right way.
In the right way, and then importantly, spending on health, spending on education, that and also rural development. All this have to continue.
Yeah.
Of course, with a larger budget, you can do more. See? And then, of course, we have to ensure that the spending is effective and also efficient. You see? So that whatever spending, you get the 100% multiplier effect, you see. So that's very important.
And also stop the leakages of
stop the leakages and all that.
That's no joke, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that I think is what the current, over the past 3 years, we are seeing that effort being intensified, you see. But importantly, for growth to be sustained going forward, we need to ensure that there is investor confidence and also a continuing rise in private investment. Very important, because private investment, you expand your industrial capacity, and then importantly, move into new emerging industries that can help to sustain our growth momentum going forward, and then importantly, move to a higher value and then higher productivity kind of net growth, you see. So all in all, you see the spending in the right place, both in health and education, that are focused on strengthening our innovative capabilities and also to develop greater efficiency across all sectors of the economy. Those are very important, because without growth, it will be much harder for government to spend and also to sustain its poverty eradication programs. And then importantly, we're lifting up the floor, because uneven growth is also one of the disadvantages. Even if you have growth without equity, it is not stable and not sustainable in the long term. So over the longer term, we see that Malaysia, because of resilience due to our diversified economy, and then importantly, institutional building. We must build quality institutions, and that quality institutions will in turn result in more efficient spending, more creativity and innovative strategies and policy, not just in the government, but also importantly in the private sector, to actually spearhead our economic transformation in order to sustain our place in the high-income economies among the world. So I think importantly, reaching the target of a high income is important, but importantly, it's the income convergence that is needed so that we can reach what we call the frontier economy. So that income convergence is where Malaysia will be our next focus. Once we have reached a high income status, is to ensure that the gap, we still have a fairly big gap with the other advanced economies in terms of per capita income. It's closing the gap that requires us to redouble our effort.
What I find interesting in this budget is that not only does the Prime Minister raise the minimum wage, the Human Resources Ministry or Kesuma has also outlined that specific job occupation must reach a specific minimum wage for that occupation. Is this something that we should be looking at as well?
Yes. Those are what we call indicators of how successful we are in terms of expanding our investment, in terms of generating jobs that are high wage in nature, but also importantly skills-based, so that the skills are able to meet the industry needs. And I think the critical factor is the horse pulling the cart going forward, and we are seeing that horse in the form of investments, and private investment is accelerating. So that has provided a lot of optimism, especially among market participants, including foreign investors. And that is the key driver, because this is the factor that has been missing for a long time. Sufficient level of investment that is in the range of between 20 to 25% of GDP, whereas currently we are only around 17 to 18%. So the recent surge in private investment, particularly FDI, and those FDI are in the higher tech industry, and that has provided a lot of optimism that Malaysia will be able to reach the high income status and cross over, and then of course very important to sustain the growth momentum until we can close the gap with other advanced developed nation status.
I saw an article as well that talks about some countries achieving high income status, but after a certain time they drop back to middle income. Is that a risk that you're thinking of constantly?
Yes, there is a risk that we see in countries like Argentina that move up and down, high income level, but very important, we need the social political stability. Peaceful nation, we need peace and stability in order for economic growth to take place. So it's very important to preserve the peace and stability in the country,
and
socially and the continuity. So I think that is more or less been settled over the last 3 years, and hopefully if it continues, then we will likely see greater dividends, so-called peace dividends. From
is that an official term? Peace dividends?
Peace dividend, yes. Because you don't have to spend so much on
instability, what do you call that? Unstable premium, peace dividend.
So we are able to reap that kind of dividends to basically crowd in investments, crowd in spending. I think that would be the so-called the basic formula for growth, whereby domestic spending is sufficient to ensure that your growth at least achieve a minimum of 3 to 4%, and then another 2 to 3% top up from investments, from especially foreign investments.
DDI as well, what do you think?
Yes, DDI is very important in order to strengthen the supply chain, and then importantly to spread the benefits among the micro and small and medium-sized enterprises. So that it will be part of inclusive growth, whereby you want to spread growth to the smaller players as well across the different lesser developed regions like East Coast and Sabah and Sarawak.
Okay, Prof, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a bit more in terms of the RMK13 wish list or planning.
Jelajah JIWA SME 2024 sampai ke kemuncaknya. Jom ke finali JIWA SME di Central ICT Shah Alam pada 25 hingga 27 Oktober.
Luaskan rangkaian perniagaan anda bersama Unified Business serta sesi perkongsian ilmu bersama SME tempatan. Banyak lagi aktiviti lain termasuklah pencarian bakat dan persembahan artis.
Jumpa anda di sana.